Meeting called to order at 8:38 a.m. on April 28, 2026. At this time, I'll take a roll call. Alderman Thorpe.
Present.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Present.
And I'm present as well. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Let's put 15 minutes on the clock. This is a little bit of a weird one for us, so if we won't hold you to it perfectly, but that's what we've been asking all of our other directors to do. And then I'll turn it over to you folks.
Question about time. I thought the enterprise fund studies went more than 15 minutes.
It doesn't.
Maybe my calendar, I just hadn't looked at it in a while. I thought.
We have an hour. We've been asking for presentation to be a certain amount of time and then time for questioning.
So I understand this one's a little different than all the other ones. So if that's not what you guys prepared for, I'm fine with that. Let's let the timer ding just so we have a sense of how long we're going, but I'm not going to cut you off then. Sound good? How long
Sounds great.
were you planning on presenting for?
Probably 5 to 7 minutes per fund
Okay, sure.
would be my guess is how fast David can go.
Cool. Well, yeah, go ahead.
All right, well, I'll get started. My name's Dave Heider. I'm with Stantec. I'm here today to talk about the enterprise funds. So we're going to talk about the water and sewer fund, the stormwater fund, and then the refuse fund. We'll take a similar approach as we go through each of the funds. And for those of you that have been through this in the past, it's a similar format. In terms of the approach that we use, for each of the funds, we're developing a financial plan. We're looking out over a 10-year projection period. And what that allows us to do is forecast the revenue requirements of the system. So that's what it costs to provide water, sewer, stormwater, or refuse service. That forecast takes the budget and then looks also back at historical spending. Forecast that budget over the 10-year period based upon inflation factors for each line item. We're also including capital investments, those that have been made in the past in the form of debt service that you have to pay off, as well as any future capital improvements. That gives us a sense for the costs in the system. We then do a forecast of the revenues at the current rates and fees to see whether we have sufficient revenues to meet those expenses. Then we can evaluate how the financial plan is working in terms of some key metrics, looking, are we able to meet those revenue requirements, and are we maintaining adequate cash within the system? I'm going to try to take this off. All right, so that's the overall approach. So as we look at the water and sewer fund, the starting point that we have is our fiscal year 27 water revenue requirements. So this is made up of the various components. We have operating maintenance expenses, so the day-to-day operations of the system. You do have existing debt service, about $3.9 million that'll have to be paid in debt service in 2027. You also cash fund some portion of your capital improvement plan, so that's revenues from the system. And then we also have a little bit of projected debt. Overall, the budget, based on the numbers we have, increases by about 7% in fiscal year 27. This is just that 10-year forecast that I talked about, so you can see the line item expenditures for operating expenses, $6.89 million in fiscal year 27, and then that grows to about $9 million by 2036. You can see the various capital expenses, so we're keeping 1.47 of annual pay-go. You do have existing debt service that you have to pay off. We're also assuming that you're going to bond fund some of the capital projects, so that grows in terms of annual debt service. But the bottom line is about $5.61 million in capital for water. When we total that up, we're at $12.5 million in terms of revenue requirements or total expenses for water, and that grows over time. And then to do that revenue sufficiency, we can compare, okay, at your current water rates, how much revenue are you generating? You're at about 9.76. So clearly the current revenues are not in line with the expenses of the system. If we don't change rates, our revenues are going to stay constant. Just what this looks like. Yes.
Can I ask you, how is our revenue going down there in future years? Is that inflation adjusted?
We are assuming some modest reduction in use that we've seen in terms of customers being more efficient with their use.
Thank you.
Yep. So this is just graphically the exact same information. You can see how the bars stack over time. Blue bars being your operating expenses, light blue being that cash funded capital. So the total of these would be the revenue requirements, and if we keep our water rates constant, that's the red line. Obviously, your expenses are growing at a greater clip than your revenues would because we're keeping them constant. So if that plays forward, you currently have a minimum, or you currently have a cash balance within your operating fund. It's about 12 million for water. We've talked about this in the past. If you do have those ongoing reductions or ongoing losses on the system, you would eat into that cash balance. We try to maintain a minimum balance of 6 months of your operating expenses in this cash balance. You would fall below that in 29, and by 2030, basically we would run out of cash, and that would continue to go negative going forward. We shift gears and look at the sewer fund before we talk about the potential increases. This is the revenue requirements for sewer system, about 11.3 million, vast majority being your operating expenses. A big component of that is the wastewater treatment plant expenses that are contracted with the county. Those are increasing 5% in fiscal year 27. Overall budget goes up about 5%. And you do have some new debt service, about $280,000 from the 2025 public improvement bonds. As we play this forward, operating expenses, again, the 9.1 million, we inflate that going forward, be about 12 million by the end of the projection period. You can see your capital expenses. There's a little bit that's cash funded capital, existing and then future debt. In total, again, 11.37. Your current sewer rates generate about 8.83 million. So we're seeing a similar result on the sewer side in terms of revenues not keeping up with expenses. And then similarly, I don't know what happened to this graph. This is the graphical representation, again, your revenues being the red line, not keeping up with your expenses. Not sure why that graph is looking bad. But ultimately, going forward, this is what the result would look like in terms of the operating fund cash balance within the sewer fund. You also have about 12 million. You drop below in 2029, that minimum. And then we would go negative cash balance by 2030. So what we're recommending in terms of the financial plan is that you continue to do some rate increases. So water rate increases at 4.75% in 2027. And then we're recommending that you're likely going to need to continue to increase rates at that 4.75% going forward. This is consistent with what we presented last year. Future increases beyond 2030 are going to likely need to continue to happen. But one key takeaway is that essentially each year that we go through this process, we ultimately do determine that it seems like things are being pushed out a year in terms of when the funds are going to go negative. So this is the result with the increases. So we're showing that if things played out exactly as planned, by 2030 we would drop below that minimum, and by 2031 we would run out of cash. And so if all expenses happen as planned, we do the 4.75%, they wouldn't be sufficient. But each year that we look at this, typically the spending doesn't occur at the level that's been anticipated. The capital isn't executed as quickly, and therefore it gets pushed out another year. At some point, if we see a more accelerated drop, we would recommend that you're going to have to do higher rate increases. But at this time, still recommending the 4.75 for both water and for sewer. Again, seeing by 2031, if everything played out as planned, that we would have a negative cash balance. So combined, this is what it looks like with water and sewer together as a combined enterprise fund. Again, 2031 is when we would go negative. But again, every single year, we tend to push that out one more year, and the 4.75 appears to be appropriate. But it's something we want to closely monitor to make sure that you continue to execute at a level that would allow you to continue to do the 4.75. So what this looks like in terms of the actual rates, your rate structure, you have a fixed charge for water and for sewer that's scaled based upon your meter size. This is just applying that 4.75 across the board to both the fixed charges as well as the usage rates. So the usage rates are shown to the right. For residential customers, you have what's called an inclining block rate. So the more water you use, once you step into the higher tiers, the more that water cost per 1,000 gallons. So for 0 to 7,000, it's currently $5 with a 4.75% increase. And then once you're over 7,000, for each 1,000 gallons, it's $10. Non-residential properties pay a flat unit rate per 1,000 gallons of $9.44. And then on the sewer side, everybody pays per 1,000 gallons $6.88. And again, these are after the 4.75% increases. What this looks like on a typical customer bill, typical customer using 12,000 gallons per quarter, you bill on a quarterly basis. You can see the current bill for somebody using that amount would be about $190 per quarter. With that 4.75% increase, the bill would go up to $199, so about a $9.10 per quarter increase for your average customer. And then if you continue with those 4.75s, you can see where you'll be in future years, getting up to about $218 per quarter in 2029. I just want to show you how you compare against some comparable and local utilities. Currently with the 109, again, this is a comparison at somebody, single family, using 12,000 gallons per quarter. Where you currently are in comparison, where you'd be in 2027 with the increases, and then where these other jurisdictions currently are. It's important to note that this is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. We don't know yet what most of these jurisdictions are going to do in 2027. I know the county is contemplating increases, so likely theirs will go up as well, and most other jurisdictions generally do increase rates on an annual basis. So again, a bit of an apples to oranges comparison, but you're still at the lower end, even with the increase.
Pause there for questions.
Sure. Can you go back to slide 5? Which one of these categories, or maybe a better way to put it is, what's the breakdown in growth among these categories? If we're seeing 7% growth overall, is it because they're each growing at 7%? Is one of them growing at 10 and one's only growing at 2? Roughly, what's the breakdown in growth?
I think just off the top of my head, I think the biggest growth is the fact that you do have, as we look at overall budget, you do have additional debt coming on. So that is a component. But then the other component, I think, is probably in the salaries component. We are seeing increases in chemicals and energy, pretty substantial in recent years. But that might be one we have to get back to you in terms of a little bit more detail.
Yeah, if you could, that would be great. Just between FY26 and FY27, for each one of those categories, what's the percent growth? And even, I appreciate you getting into salaries if you can, that's great, but honestly, I was just looking for those 4 things.
Sure.
Alderwoman O'Neill, do you want to ask questions? Anybody? Questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Is 31% debt service standard for water and sewer?
It really depends. Depending upon kind of the phase you're in, we see some utilities that are, newer. They have less infrastructure that they've had to rehab, and therefore they have lower debt. We've seen, at one time, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, WSSC, had about 50% of their revenue requirements was debt service. So you typically want to be in that 30 to 40% would be more common. But each utility is kind of going through a different life cycle in terms of if you're having to do major rehab or significant reinvestment in the system, you're likely going to have a higher component of debt.
And this is historically high for Annapolis due to the construction of the new water plant in 2017, 2018.
So, Director Vogel, maybe this is for you. We're talking expenses, revenue to cover expenses. And you just addressed one of my questions is managing expenses. That's you, right?
Correct. And the folks behind me.
Right, right. Well, I was going to say something negative, so it's you.
It's me.
So I have a broad question, which is probably a softball unless you want to dive into it, which is my concern about increased expenses and management of that. And I guess the softball, the real question is, from a managing expenses standpoint, are we managing expenses appropriately so that when we explain the rate increases, that we're doing the best job we can to keep the rate down?
So I'll start with what is the goal of an asset management program for a utility or infrastructure? And the goal is desired level of service at lowest life cycle cost. It's not lowest cost, because if we went lowest cost, we might not be worried about inspecting fire hydrants, we might not be exercising valves, and we might slow down our line replacements. So you defer those things or don't do them. You have a water main break, your valve doesn't work, so now you start expanding your circle of valves that you try to see if you can isolate that leak so you can repair it. And now, instead of 20 customers having a 4-hour outage, 800 customers have an 8-hour outage. So right, you have this sort of trade-off. And we have, over the past 3 or 4 budget cycles, added 1 or 2 positions or partial positions in order to do a better overall job at asset management. And on the services side, the workers in the field, we've also added some positions. We've insourced some functions that we used to contract, valve exercising, for instance. The goal there was actually to be able to get better service at about the same price. So here, I'm not too worried about expenses. The things that we can control in terms of being efficient or effective, because those things are in the services side, the contract side, the cost of producing water, particularly losing water. We've seen, I think, we just met with MDE, and I believe we've reduced our total water losses, which means water produced minus water billed, the delta is losses. We've reduced that by something like 20 or 30% over the past 5 years. Really? Now, that was a bit of a peak because there was a series of breaks or a few very large breaks that we were able to go after, identify, find those breaks, and then minimize those losses. But we have a really good proactive program for looking for leaks. That's reducing some of our energy costs, our chemical costs, and so on and so forth. So to speak to the earlier question that Alderman Huntley asked, which is, what's the growth here? I'd bet a good amount of money that the growth is going to be in debt service. We're just simply executing our capital projects the way we planned to when we first came out with our asset management plan in 2018.
Okay, thank you. And
if anybody, Diane's not here, so I'm on my own.
thank you. And that's great information about cutting water losses. Appreciate that. My final question for this.
Hold on, before you go into a different question, I think Mr. Johnson had something to jump in with.
Yes, Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. I was just going to say, just with a quick glance, we're looking at capital projects was like a $700K increase. Contracts was like $200K, and then debt service was like $200K as well. So that's some of it, just looking at a quick glance, not even going into deeper detail. Yeah.
And when you say capital projects, that would translate here to cash-funded capital?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It's pay-go. Alderman Thorpe.
So last year, I was struck when I saw the graph with when we run out of money. And this year, to your point, the graph looks exactly the same. So the classic worry is we can pay a little bit every year or pay a lot as we get closer. What I hear you saying is take another year to look at it, see if we're still 5 years out, which point 4.75 is the right number. Because what we don't want to do is go up to a 10% increase or something like that. So you two and as well as the folks at the table, did you consider going to 5% or 5.25% to push that out farther?
We didn't, for exactly the reasons you said. Once, this is third or fourth one of these I've been to, and it's the red, we get into the red about 3 years from now. And there are a couple of reasons. Dave mentioned one of them, which is we don't execute capital projects quite as quickly as we project. The other one is we always have a few positions that are not filled. And so those, that salary projection, here we have every position is filled is the assumption here. But the reality is there's always 2-3 positions that are not filled, and so that helps us financially as well. So my recommendation is as steady as we go until that point becomes maybe 2 years from now or next year, then we start bumping things up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and
Because we have another lever. We can always intentionally slow down capital spend as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're just going to move on. I'm going to try and keep an eye on our time. We have 3 funds to go, and we've got about an hour. So I'm just going to say we'll limit ourselves to, we'll do questions after each one like we just did, but we'll limit ourselves to no more than 20 minutes for the presentation of the fund and the questions. Just telling you guys. Go ahead.
All right, we'll move on to stormwater. So we just have stormwater and then refuse, so 2 more funds. Using a similar format, this is the stormwater revenue requirement. Total revenue requirement in 2027 is about $3.7 million. We have seen in recent years just some observations in terms of spending. The CIP spending has accelerated, so it's one that we're watching closely. And you're continuing to cash fund a portion of your capital projects, the retrofits and the MS4 compliance. We are incorporating $515,000 for the tree program, and that is growing over time. By 2030, it's about $800,000. And then we also did have some debt that was issued in the 2025 public improvement bonds that comes in. So that all makes up the revenue requirements for stormwater. Breaking it down a little bit more, just in terms of, this was talked about last year as we bring in the tree program, how much of a component that is of the operating expenses. So this is just a little bit more detail breakdown of the expenses. You can see the salaries and benefits, the tree program at the 515, total operating then at about 2.5 million, of which 500,000 is the tree program. So similar forecast, we take the operating expenses, we inflate those forward, operating at 2.51, going up to about 3.52 by 2036. You can see the capital expenses, cash funded capital, or the PAYGO, about 700,000. We have your existing debt and the payoff of that existing debt, and then some projected debt to fund capital projects. In total, the 3.71 in comparison to your current stormwater fees at the current rates bring in about $3 million. So we're seeing a similar result as to water and sewer. Revenues are a little bit less than expenses, and that's obviously projected to stay the same as we forecast that forward. This is what it looks like graphically. So you can see your operating expenses in the light blue growing over time, your cash funded capital growing, paying off that existing debt, and then the future debt. And then the red line is your revenues with your existing stormwater fees. So less cash within the operating fund for stormwater, currently at about 2.5 million. We're showing that by 2029, you'd be in the red, exhaust all funds within the stormwater fund. So in order to address that, as I mentioned, you're continuing to execute a little bit more capital, so it is putting more pressure on the fund. What we're recommending in fiscal year 27 is a 15% increase. That was what was recommended last year. I believe a 12% increase was actually adopted in the stormwater fees. And then we're recommending 7% going forward through 2030. One nuance, this applies to both water and sewer, but has a more impactful on the stormwater side is that level of PAYGO versus bonding. We are assuming that about 30% of the capital is PAYGO funded. If you were to transition and spend a little bit more in bonding, that would put a little bit less pressure on the fund. So I'm showing here with the forecast, we're showing that by 2030, we would basically deplete the funds within the stormwater fund. One way to address this would obviously be higher rate increases, but also if we determine that it'd be appropriate to spend a little bit more in debt, that would help to maintain that cash. But it's one of the things we look at on an annual basis. But again, we see a similar result. There's a little bit less wiggle room on the stormwater side given the cash balance. But again, we're seeing each year that it's pushed out basically a year as we go forward. To both water, sewer, stormwater, and refuse, we do want to monitor this closely. We don't want the city to go into a position where all of a sudden you have to do a really sizable increase. So it's something we do monitor closely. This is the current stormwater fee structure. So for residential properties, single family, multifamily, it's just a per unit charge for stormwater per quarter. So with that 15% increase for your single family home, it would go from $34 a quarter to $39. Multifamily would go from $17 to $19. And then if you're a non-residential property, you're placed in tiers of impervious area. And so the more impervious area you have, you fall into one of these tiers, and you can see what the stormwater fees would be with that 15% increase. This is just a single family bill comparison for stormwater, where you are currently, where you'd be with the 15%. Again, an apples to orange comparison because of the fact that these are current rates in these other jurisdictions, and most folks do increase their stormwater fees annually. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the structure. So this is, again, how you currently charge single family. It's on a per ERU or equivalent residential unit basis. Everybody pays the same. But when we talk about the non-residential, as I mentioned, you're currently in tiers. That is less common in terms of an approach that utilities use or cities use. Because there is a significant variation in terms of impervious area by non-residential property type. For example, if you have 200,000 square feet of impervious, you're falling into that tier 4 regardless. So there's a really wide range. And we've talked about this in the past in terms of potentially modifying this tier structure. So what we're recommending this year is that you transition to non-residential properties be charged rather than based on tiers, based upon their actual measured impervious area as multiples of ERUs, or equivalent residential units. As a result of this approach, you would see some non-residential properties would see increases outside of just the 15% increase, and some would actually see decreases. So I have 3 examples here. The first example is a property with 21,000 square feet of impervious. They would currently fall into tier 2. Because
If I can just interrupt you for one
Sure.
moment. What is IA up here? Build IA.
impervious area. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. So effectively, that property, property 1, their build impervious area is currently about 10,000 square feet because they fall into the middle of that tier, which is equivalent to about 5 ERUs. They're paying $196 per quarter under the 2027 rates. If we actually take their measured impervious, which was 21,000 square feet, we divide that by the ERU, which is the equivalent residential unit, 2,100 square feet of impervious area, they're actually a measured 10 ERUs. So we take those 10 ERUs times the $39 per ERU, which would mean that they should pay $397 per quarter. Another example, property 2, they fall into that same tier. They've got 6,300 square feet of impervious. So they're treated the same as somebody with 21,000 square feet, but they actually only have 3 ERUs. We take that 6,300 divided by 2,100, turns into 3 ERUs. We multiply the 3 times the $39, they would pay $119. And then you do have some properties in the city that are really large, a lot of impervious area. So somebody's got 10,000 square feet of impervious. They're currently placed into tier 4. That's 64 ERUs. They currently would pay under the new rates about $2,500, but they're actually representative of about 100 ERUs. So we take the 210,000 divided by the 2,100, multiply that by the $39 per quarter per ERU, and they should pay about $4,000. So you can see the misalignment that currently happens with the tiers. This type of approach is very, very common. Most utilities, most cities that have stormwater fees charge non-residential properties in this manner. You effectively currently have a cap on your structure because somebody with a lot of impervious never pays more than that tier 4. So that would be a recommended change. We talked a little bit about this last year. I don't know why that's doing. This is a graph that just shows the number of parcels. Maybe during the questions, I'm going to switch to my computer, but how they would be impacted. There's a broad range of properties in the city. Some would actually see bill reductions. Some would see increases. There's essentially 11 that would see an over $2,000 increase. There's about 7 that would see between a $1,000 and $2,000 increase. There's 8 that would see between $800 and $1,000, and you can see on down the line. In total, there's about 100 that would see a bill reduction. So there's a broad range of impacts.
I don't suppose you know what the percentages are for bill reduction and zero change without being able to see it?
I will come back to that.
Okay,
once I
that's
get this
great.
fired
Thank
up.
you.
So in terms of our recommendation, we are recommending for the 27 budget that you assume the current fee structure. But the city does recommend as part of the fee structure change that there be an alternative fee structure for non-residential properties, recommending that there be a 6-month grace period. So essentially, non-residential properties wouldn't be billed under this structure until January 1st of 2027. And city staff is going to provide an accompanying enhanced non-residential stormwater fee reduction program. So if you manage stormwater on your property, you'd be able to reduce your bill. So essentially an incentive to take action to make sure you're managing stormwater on your property. Refuse, and I'm going to pull this up.
Great, thank you. I'm going to look at my questions, see if any are just clarifying. Yeah, just one to start off. How did we define multifamily for the purpose of this? And really what I'm trying to get at is, obviously a big apartment building's multifamily, obviously a detached single-family home is not, but the middle is a townhouse multifamily, it's a duplex multifamily. Where do we draw the line on that for stormwater?
My understanding is that it's basically if you're a townhome or a duplex, you would be a single family.
Okay.
Considered a single
So
family.
it's only sort
truly
of-
multi-unit.
Got it, where you're sharing a hallway or something, okay. All right, colleagues, you guys got questions on Alderwoman O'Neill? And also, I'll say, I realized we do have a little bit more leeway on time because we budgeted a bunch of time.
I'm going to hold off on my questions because I'm still trying to. Would it be possible for you to share us?
Certainly,
Thank you.
yeah.
Couldn't find it.
Oh, okay. It's already been shared with us.
Okay, great.
I didn't see it. Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Thorpe?
So this may either be a simple question or a long question, so we'll try to keep the simple answer. The tree program appears to be 20% of this expense. What does the tree program include?
The person who runs the tree program isn't here, but my understanding is it's planting trees.
I think it's also some of taking them down, right? Maintaining them? Don't we, like, we've got a tree on Prince George Street that Brian's taking down. Ms. Buckland, you want to answer it rather than me pontificate?
Yeah, I'll do my best, but I think that when planning and zoning is here, that's a good question for them, or as a follow-up question. Yeah, so the urban forester Brian works at meeting the city's goal for a tree canopy. So it is planting trees, working on various strategies to incentivize tree planting outside of public areas, which is the only place where we can directly plant trees. And then all of that maintenance. There's an overlay of that work with planning and zoning and critical areas, and he does a bunch of plan reviews as part of the permitting process to make sure that that the elements of development plans that speak to tree cover and some of those other zoning overlays, that they're responsive to those. So he ends up being part of the plan review process for a number of different things, as well as sort of the direct service part of planting and maintaining trees.
Okay, so those expenses that are together with that revenue belong to planning and zoning? All of them? The tree program?
Yeah, that work sits inside planning and zoning, yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Different subject. If we are to go to this different rate structure, are you taking into account, maybe this is Director Vogel, working with the PIO and making sure that there is a very strong communication program as to the new way to do things, the possible delay, et cetera?
Absolutely, and I'd ask Ann and Mike to come up. They can speak to this very well. But in short, we need to first get council approval, right?
Yeah.
We're here today as kind of the first formal step. The fee schedule will be presented in a couple of weeks. Once that gets adopted, and we have this implementation date of 1 January, which is very unusual. Usually the fees are set for the year, and that's the year. But because of this, right, we need an approval, and then we need 6 months to message everything and set up the billing systems and so on and so forth. That's really why that 6-month delay is necessary.
Okay, thank you. That's good, as long as, and I assumed you were, but worth saying.
And I'll just say, we had a hearing about this at Environmental Matters, not to say you can't ask questions now, but if you want to go back and get real detail about it.
Okay. And then to confirm, delaying the rate increase on the non-residential side is baked into the numbers for the projection in the years forward. Is that correct?
It is. So we're assuming the rates go up in this July, and then essentially there's that rate structure change that would happen January 1. It's a little bit uncertain in terms of the additional if you didn't offer any additional fee reductions or credits, you'd actually get a little bit more revenue out of this change in structure. But we don't know necessarily how much people are going to apply and what reduction they would see in terms of their bills as a result of that. So we're assuming it's revenue neutral from that point forward. So that is factored into the analysis, I guess is the short answer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, what's up?
No, just chiming in, Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. The tree program has been under budget. They haven't been nowhere near close to what their budget is.
Meaning they're not spending
They're
what
not
we're
spending this
spending.
much.
Budget.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Interesting.
And just speaking from, the peanut gallery, it always seemed to me that it was going to be challenging to ramp up that program because we have pretty much saturated the land that we own, and working with property owners, as we found when we try to do sidewalks or, bike paths and things like that, that's just a fairly lengthy process. So it does not surprise me that spending is, that they're just a little bit under their plan.
That's why we're taking down a tree on Prince George Street to fix the sidewalk. We're getting the sidewalk fixed.
Would it make sense to look at that trend and factor that into the rate increase? i.e. reduce the rate increase?
I think that's a bit of a tricky question. Because the fund balance is so low, I'm just going to leave that one alone.
So what I hear you saying is be careful to do that, but maybe look at it in the future if we're not.
Yes, I think
Spend in the tree fund.
if we're revenue, once we hit a point where we're kind of cash neutral, yes, potentially.
What's the goal of our stormwater program? We had this, you said it so beautifully about the last fund. You said lowest possible life cycle cost and level of service residents expect. With this, what is the service that we are trying to provide? Is it some kind of amorphous clean creeks? Is it a very quantifiable, this much less pollutant? Is it just plain meet our MS4 goals? What is that goal?
Combination. So from the resident level of service standpoint, we want to make sure that the storm drains that we have actually convey stormwater. So they need to be maintained. And so that's just a basic utility maintenance thing. There are also projects that can, we can add some additional storm drainage where a street maybe doesn't have adequate or it doesn't have any storm water drainage. We do fund some of those projects. I'm speculating here, or I'm not 100% confident in this answer, but I think we use the general fund to do some of that as well. And then you get into the water quality thing. So yes, MS4 compliance, we have a legal target we need to meet, and that is, and so there are projects there that is a reduced pollution goal. And then there are other sort of goals, which is to preserve our streams. So you decrease stormwater runoff, then you decrease erosion as well. So this is very much a combination of those things, which yes, amorphous would not be inaccurate.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing up also the just not have standing water in places and not have people's yards flood, because that was not something I mentioned.
Right.
I would love it if we can get to a better way of knowing if we're meeting our goal on this program. It's so intuitive in a way on the water program to me, and it's not very clear to me on the stormwater program. Am I missing? Do we have performance metrics specific to the stormwater program? Maybe that's a Ms. Buckland question?
I would have to look, but again, please come up.
I mean, I do see under general fund, we have just number of MS4 permit requirements, so that's probably somewhat related.
That's Mike Rosberg, Stormwater Program Manager, Public Works. That is a topic of discussion that we've been looking at internally, and a lot of it is related to what Burr was talking about. And MS4 is kind of, like you said, a very not intuitive goal, but that does cover a lot of the goals that we talk about as far as our state requirements. But also there's that whole, we have to just maintain our existing infrastructure as far as just conveyance goes and everything else, which, and again, even stormwater requirements at the state level is a growing requirement as far as what we are experiencing in our next permit cycle. So it is a very, but we should still analyze our goals and make them, more clear and because more clear to what we are doing, with the funds for sure.
Yeah, I mean, environmentalism is something that I care a lot about. That's why I sit on the Environmental Matters Committee. But at the same time, I think it's like anything else. The way to do it well is to be really data-driven. So I won't pontificate too much more.
Would it be helpful we do an annual report on our MS4 compliance? Is that something we provide you?
It's online. We post our annual report online every year.
Okay, I'll take a look through that. That sounds like some excellent.
And then do we want to make that a little bit more digestible to the non-expert in that field, right?
Yeah. I'll read it before bed. Okay, so you started to talk at one point about we could shift our revenue a little bit more towards bond funding, do a little less capital project funding from PAYGO, do a little more bond funding. Why, if we are currently projecting a 15% rate increase this year and then smaller rate increases in the future, that seems like the perfect scenario for doing exactly what you suggested. So why is that not the recommendation?
I guess from my perspective, it's because of the ramp up in the spending on capital, it's a little bit more aggressive than we've seen in the other funds. So if we get to a point where the city is executing capital at a much greater pace, it may be a point in time where we would want to transition to use a little bit more debt so that we could mitigate those rate increases, would be kind of the argument. The whole argument between cash and debt is it's a long-lived asset, and therefore, does it make sense? In some instances, it makes sense to pay for that asset over a longer period of time. So it's just one of those toggles, I guess, because of the fact that you're not sitting on 12 million within this fund, it's a smaller amount. There's just less room for error in that perspective. So I brought it up as something to continue to evaluate going forward. Ideally, if things keep getting pushed out, I think our plan of the 15% and then the sevens in cash funding is ideal because that's more sustainable long-term. But to the extent that we would need to complete more capital in a more aggressive rate, that would be an option.
Could we come up with a projection in which we raise the rates by, I don't know, 10%, 12% this year, and then also raise them by by a lower rate this year, but by a higher rate in out years because we are doing more bond funding now and less PAYGO capital funding now? Is that something we could put on the table for us to consider?
Yeah, we could certainly run that type of scenario.
Yeah, and if you do it and tell me because of your low fund balance, this is a really bad idea, I want to know that. But it seems like this is a perfect opportunity to smooth out our rate increases.
Yeah, we could certainly run that scenario.
You look like maybe you have something to say, Director Vogel.
No, again, just thinking about trees, just like how does that play into this?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep moving then.
Just to your earlier question, that about 23% of the non-residential properties would see a bill reduction, about 29% would see no change, and then the remainder would see a modest increase or a more sizable increase depending upon their impervious area.
Yep, that's the political talking point I'm getting out of that is more than half see no change or a decrease. That's great. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the refuse fund. Just a little bit of background in terms of the refuse fund. We'll talk about it extensively today, but the city does contract out the majority of the services provided within the refuse fund. So really, as a result of that, the refuse fund expenditures are largely outside the control of the city. We've seen increases in fiscal year 27 due to the result of the expiration of your 7-year contract. So you had to go out to bid last year. You now have a new contract that begins for fiscal year 27. That's reflected in the numbers that we're looking at today. And then that collection contract does include monthly fuel adjustments and annual increases tied to CPI. So that's really the key driver for the refuse fund. The revenue requirements in total, you can see it's about 4.5 million. Vast majority of that is your operating expenses. You have a little bit of existing debt, but 83% of that 4.5 million is the contract services. Just to give you some perspective, the O&M expenses, because of the contract, have increased substantially over the last 3 years. Going from 2024 actuals to the budget is about a 30% increase, and that's largely driven by those contract services. There's a little bit of a reduction in 27 of 250,000 for environmental services, given the new contract and the curb recycling program for 2027. So similar forecast, just taking the operating expenses, inflating them based upon CPI and other known factors to give us a forecast that hopefully represents what the contract services are going to be going forward. Again, you have a little bit of existing debt, not much. Total refuse expenses, 4.5 million. Revenues with your current refuse fees are about 4 million. So there is a little bit of a gap, not as substantial as in the other funds. What this looks like graphically, again, most of your expenses are operating at 4.5 million, and then you can see if we just keep the refuse fees flat, we would have a growing gap within the fund. As a result, you've got about 2 million currently in your operating fund for the refuse fund. That would go negative by 2029 if you don't adjust the refuse fees, and then it would go further negative in future years. So revenues don't currently keep up with the expenditures. largely based upon the program. We are recommending an increase in fiscal year '27 of 7.5%. And then we think 5% increases, given the level of the contract services and how that's going to change over time, would be necessary to keep the program sustainable. And so this fund has operated closer to actual expenses, unlike the other funds we've talked about, in terms of, there's not the capital, the contract is what it is, so the annual expenses have come in very close to what's been budgeted. With the increases that we're talking about, the 7.5% and then the 5%, we would maintain that minimum balance. We would get close to it in 2030. This just assumes we continue with the 5% increases going forward. You'd obviously be building up some fund balance in future years. The city evaluates this on an annual basis, so if you're building up those fund balances, you potentially wouldn't need to do the increase. But again, at some point in the future, you will have to go out to bid for the contract again, and there may be a jump up in expenses in future years. That's currently not reflected. Just in terms of where you compare, current annual fee for stormwater for single-family resident, not stormwater, for refuse, is $431. With that 7.5% increase, it'd go to $463. So you're kind of in the middle of the pack. Sound like a broken record, but most utilities do adjust their refuse fees on an annual basis. I know Anne Arundel County is considering it, so theirs is likely going to go up. So you'll probably most likely continue to be in the middle. And then just to bring it all together, we can talk about refuse, but this is just the total residential quarterly bill with the 3 funds that we've talked about today. So water and sewer bill, using 12,000 gallons, that's going up $9 a quarter. Stormwater bill going up $5 a quarter, and then the refuse going up $8. So in total, we're looking at about a $22 increase per quarter for typical residential customer with the recommended increases. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, that was fast on that one. The trash one is always the simplest. Alderwoman O'Neill, you have questions?
I have questions, but they're more towards Burr than Stanchek. In regards to the trash contract, as you know, the biggest complaint that residents have is that they don't feel that they get bang for their buck in trash collection. Constantly, leaving trash at the, if I've got 3 bags in my can and my can's lid doesn't fit, my trash is left on the curb. In the new contract, was any of that discussed?
I'm going to put a fine point on this and say that as I walked out my front door this morning, I had to pick up some trash from my trash can that had gotten left in the street. So appreciate you asking the question.
So, right, the city made a decision 10, 15 years ago to go from city employees doing trash collection to contract. And we do have a contract structure that I think is biased towards low cost. And it allows the contractor a lot of leeway in terms of going fast. And the way they pay their employees is to move fast. So no major structural changes from the old contract to the new that I'm not aware of. And Tracy is here, so Tracy, please come on up. Feel free to add your perspective here. I do feel like going into a new contract where that contractor has a long performance period ahead of them, where we have a lot of incentives and a lot of disincentives. So we have the ability to financially punish them if we're not seeing the service that we like. They are also bringing a lot of technology to play here, cameras on the trucks, so everything is going to be able to, visually, confirm or dispute these customer complaints. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will see an uptick in sort of the level of customer service. But at the same time, we had this contractor before, and it didn't go particularly well then. So I'm just kind of eyes wide open on, I don't know exactly how this is going to go. But they, because of so much, they got penalized a lot, MBG did, when they were with us the first time. They said, we lost a lot of money on this contract. They were doing the kickoff. Are you guys going to be so hard on us this time? And we're like, yeah, do better. So
And then what's the length of the contract?
what's the base period? 4 years?
For the new one is 10 years.
I need to pull.
But there's a number of, there's some options at the end, right?
It's,
Tracy, I think you need to pull your mic a little
Yeah.
closer.
sorry, I'm Tracy Brown, the Public Works Analyst. It is actually a 10-year contract. It's actually 2 years. Every 2 years, we can renew up to 10 years, but it's an actual 7-year contract with additional years at the end. So it's a total of 10. Total 10-year contract.
I believe, what's the base period? Like, we are committed to, I think, 7 years?
7 years,
7 years, and then with options beyond that.
correct.
So can you, what are the standards? So this is really helpful about speed is incentivized. That makes sense.
Sort of.
So when somebody says garbage was dropped in the street or my trash cans were left in the middle of the street, what is the standard that the contract requires and that we should be telling residents to make a complaint or to accept it? That's what's in the contract.
Where they pick up the containers, where they're supposed to place the containers. So to the best, the closest they can without. If they're not doing that, please bring it to our attention.
How about garbage in the street?
They are supposed to be cleaning up. They have the capability of cleaning up as soon as it drops. They have a broom, they have shovels, they should be collecting it as they get it. If it's happening, please bring it to our attention so we can address the issue.
And bring it to attention, how?
They can put it in through report a problem is the biggest thing, because then it goes directly to the supervisor. Then the supervisor will go out, take a look, and saying, okay, yep, this is an issue kind of thing. And then they will send back the contractor to go back and clean it up.
Okay, thank you. Great answer.
And then, in terms of trash in the street, what I do see sometimes is recycle bins that don't have a lid. Maybe recycling will blow out, or a recycle bin will fall over. That is not the responsibility of the contractor.
Correct.
Our recycling bin has a lid, but I hear you.
And you do have to remember on like a windy day, things are going to blow, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
they do the best they can, yeah.
No, and it's a hard job, like, no doubt about it. Right? I don't think any of us want to stand up here and say, boy, we're very upset with all of these guys. Like, we know they're individually doing a hard job. It's a question of the contract structure and how we can incentivize them to make sure they're balancing those two things appropriately: cost, speed, level of service, all those. Do you have
But to put a finer point exactly on what you just said,
Sorry, yeah. Hold on. It was, Alderwoman O'Neill did have the floor. Let's go back to her.
I still had questions.
okay.
Thank you.
You want, can we finish this? Are you finished
Still
with?
about trash.
Okay, all right.
So just a clarification on who is picking up which trash. I know city streets, neighborhoods, Harbor House, is that private trash? It's not city trash,
Private.
private. Clay Street is city, but Oberry Court is private. Is that correct?
Parts of Clay Street are single family. They front the street. We provide the trash collection. Parts of the homes on Clay Street are actually part of the public housing and serviced by their provider.
And do you happen to know if that's the same trash day?
I don't know their schedule.
So that might be part of our problem on when people are saying that trash was left, because if it's not the same trash day. Because you're supposed to take your trash can in within a certain number of hours after it's been, but if they have a different trash day for part of the street, it's a long street, 4 blocks long. Okay, and then, but we don't do anything with any of the private companies. One of the complaints I keep hearing is that there are some companies that are picking up trash at 5:30, 6 o'clock a.m.
They're not supposed to start until 6. They do get a permit from us. That's our role with private collection.
Thank you. Okay, now you can.
Alderman Thorpe.
Yeah, just to put the finer point on exactly what you're saying is we should never have an expectation that the wind blowing garbage out of a can is the responsibility of the trash collection people. So I appreciated you pointing that out. So if I could ask you to go to slide 41, realizing we're talking significantly less money than other areas, I'm concerned about rate increases that cause the minimum balance to go up as a plan. When I look at slide 43, and we obviously want to keep that bottom right number lowest as possible while maintaining the caliber of service that the director's talking about. Is there a way to plan the rates that causes us to be more stable on slide 41 or more flat, even if it's a penny or two or three?
Yeah, so if you look at specifically on slide 41, we're showing that in 2027, we're actually going to be using some fund balance. So we're going from 26, about, 1.8 million. It's going down to about 1.6. And then we're continuing that downward trajectory in terms of the actual balance. That's the gray bars to 2030, where we're at a low point. And so our recommendation would be to do the increases that we've projected, but in 2030, if we are seeing that the expenses are leveling off, you wouldn't have to continue to increase rates so that it would stay at that lower level. But unlike the other funds, we are seeing, when you budget a 4.5 million in expenses in the refuse fund, you're spending those. And so we think it's going to follow this trajectory very closely. So if you wanted to drop down to that line, you could, but it would mean that you'd have to do some bigger increases in the future.
I think maybe the model simply shows a consistent rate increase
Right.
across all of those future years from 30 to 36. There would be nothing that would prohibit us from changing the model to where the gray bar more or less has the same slope as the red line. Lower increases from 31 on. Exactly your point. We would not do this. In reality, we would not. What you see there is not what we would do.
Yeah, so for purposes of planning, I would not want to say from 31 to 36, we're going to increase it. So I hear you, Director Vogel, saying it makes sense to keep it that way through 30, 31.
Right, and at that point in time, the
Yeah.
rate increases we would want to exactly match the expenses for the next year. If the expenses go up by 1.7%, the rate increase would be 1.7%.
Yeah, so for a planning figure, realizing we're talking in the out years, realizing it's not going to change slide 43, but I guess what I'd like to do at this point is our planning figure, make that flat.
We can
So
certainly run
If
that.
we could amend that slide, just so that we're saying that, hey, we are going to raise it, but we're looking at a lower rate of increase in the future.
Yep.
To your point, Director Vogel, we will definitely have to adjust it. but-
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks. Going back to the new trash contract, are there any other changes in that contract that the public should know about?
I'll let you go first, Tracy.
No.
Okay.
There's one.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
My apologies. You're right. You're right.
I may get the name of the road incorrect, but I think it's called Shipwright Harbor back here off of Revel. And you have what is essentially a long driveway. It's privately owned, and there may be 5 homes on that street or driveway. When we used to collect trash as city employees, we would go down and people would walk from the trash truck and they would drag the bins 70 yards back up to the street and then dump them and then return the bins. When we shifted over to contracted service, we believe there's less than 10 properties throughout the city that are in that situation. Those properties were not explicitly called out in the contract, and the contractor was not required to do that. For about 10 or 12 years, this just kept happening. And these handful of residents continued to get their service until our current contractor realized that, hey, we don't actually have to do that. We're not getting paid for that. And so we're going to stop. And us being kind of 12 months out from having a new contract, we felt it wasn't necessarily worth it to go through a negotiation and try to compel them to do it and all these things. We said, we'll just roll that into the new contract. So we've added this, it's not a significant expense, but we did explicitly call out less than a dozen residences. We said, you are going to walk down that driveway and you're going to pick up that person's trash.
And so, wow, well, thank you for telling me about that. Okay, yes. So in that case, just to make sure I'm understanding, the truck doesn't go down, the people.
Right, no, the people have to walk down, wheel the bins to the street where the truck is parked. Because we don't want the trucks going down these very narrow, they're not actually streets, they're in some cases gravel.
Oh, yeah, if you try to go
and
door knocking there,
we would
people
cause
don't like it.
damage if we tried to do it, and those have been issues in the past.
Got it, thank you. Can we go back to slide 36? I almost stopped you in the middle, but I didn't think it was that important. But I don't understand this third bullet. Could you just try and explain it to me again?
Okay, so we have an old landfill that closed in I'll say the early 90s. Environmental compliance costs associated with that closed landfill have continued through this year. That's wells, drilling wells, monitoring wells. We have a landfill gas program, and so on and so forth. We have fulfilled, we have told MDE we have fulfilled the requirements of our consent agreement. It's not a consent order. Courts were never involved. We voluntarily entered into agreement to continue testing to make sure that there was no harm to human health or the environment through what's been going on there. We believe we've satisfied all of those requirements of the consent agreement, and we're stopping. So we're no longer going to sample those wells, worry about the vegetation clearance so that we can sample all of those costs. So there are a number of costs, laboratory costs and so forth, that are just ending. And so $250,000 worth of environmental compliance is stopping. We will continue to, of course, the landfill gas until all that gas is depleted. We wouldn't want to stop that because then pressure would build, and then contaminants could move someplace where we don't want them to go.
Yeah,
so we want to keep that gas pressure low.
That's great. No, I'm glad you explained it to me. Congratulations on getting that done. I just have a couple little ones. The debt on this same slide, we have, it's not a lot, but what is that from? Is it a legacy from when we had our own program, or is there some reason we're still borrowing?
I know there's no future borrowing. I don't recall what that exactly is for. Is that the maintenance facility or some component of?
What I'm trying to get at here is, are we ultimately going to get to a place where we don't have any debt in the refuse fund?
Yes, we have no plans to do other capital projects. If I had to guess, this is something we did at the landfill. Perhaps, installing the landfill gas system would be a major capital expense that we might have wanted to borrow for.
Gotcha. And then last, and I promise this is not trying to stump you guys, but I'm not trying to ask you without sounding that way. You mentioned on one of the slides that we're using CPI to project out future increases. Why CPI rather than producer purchasing index? What basket of goods are we looking at here? Are you genuinely just using like the same CPI that I would use to adjust for my retirement income, or is this something specific to what we would expect to be buying?
Yeah, it's specific to the contract. So the contract has specific CPI measurement, fuel indexes, and things of that sort. So that's what we're using.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I should have known you were already on top of it. That's all my questions. Do we have anything else from either of my colleagues? No? All right, well, we've got you. You guys mind if I go back and ask you a quick question about stormwater then? Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. I did have one last question on trash. Tracy, I'm sorry. This really is kind of for you. We had a bunch of folks go to Sweden, and they come back raving about their trash system. We see in other parts of the U.S. even where they're trying to do new things with trash. If you guys wanted to really revolutionize how we deal with trash in the city, what would that look like?
I'll start with one thing that I think we could do. And this came as a suggestion through our climate action plan, which is maybe try to keep food waste out of our solid waste collection and disposal. That's a large cost, that's heavy, and then it ends up in landfill and then produces gas and all these things. So I think that's something that's actually practical and something that a very small municipality like us could take on with the support of the public. It means it's a lot of work for the public. If we provide you a food waste bin, then you have to use that, and there's a lot of pieces that go along with it. But I think that's doable. Some of the other things you see, in I don't know, Sweden or Denmark or someplace like that, where they have incinerators and they make sure that only things that are appropriate for the incinerators are in the supply chain at all, that nothing that shouldn't be in that incinerator ends up being produced or sold in that country. Those are very much, I would think, regional or national level initiatives that would be beyond something we could tackle. But the one thing that has struck me is I think if we weighed our residents' containers and you got, just like the stormwater program, if you had a financial incentive to use less. In stormwater, we are trying to incentivize these non-residential customers to add stormwater treatment on their properties. That's really the goal of all of that is you save money if you treat your stormwater. Same thing, if we did the same thing in solid waste, we could probably reduce our environmental impact there. But it's not, none of those things are easy, but other people have done it, so it's doable.
Does our new trash contract, is that also inclusive of yard waste?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So what I'm trying to think about is, it seems natural to me that what you're talking about could be kind of lumped in with yard waste.
Sure.
But if we're wanting to set this up and we just signed a new 7-year contract for yard waste, I'd hate to set up two parallel systems when really people should put their yard waste and their food waste together. Do you think that's a major barrier to enacting what you just talked about, or is there some way we could kind of get out of the yard waste side of things?
I don't know yard waste very well. I know we collect it, it goes somewhere. Tracy knows better than I do.
Right now, where we take our yard waste, they don't take food waste with it.
Right.
So that would be, we would have to entail where we take, and we're upping the composting that we're having at Truxton Park now. We're going to be looking into a different company kind of thing, maybe bringing in more containers, trying to vamp that up more. So,
But residents right now, if you take your composting materials to the compost site, you're doing that out of your social conscience, let's say.
Right.
Not because it saves you money, or you're being required to.
My compost service costs me money, actually. And they're supposed to give me some nice compost at the end of it. I still haven't seen it. But what I'm trying to get at here is, say 6 months from now, the Environmental Matters Committee wants to have a hearing about how will we set up a compost program. Is it a totally moot point because we just have signed a 7-year contract for yard waste? No.
I don't think so. I think
No.
we can continue to promote voluntary use of a compost program, and that's got its benefits. We want to take that to the extreme, then we restructure, kind of our fees, and our contract would have to go along with that and all that. So we, where we more or less paid our customers to compost.
Okay, thank you.
always have to remember, things always changing. So where we take our yard waste, they will eventually start including new things that we can recycle in our yard waste. So as things change, we put it out there so that some things can increase on that purpose.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have you to an Environmental Matters Committee meeting at one point, Tracy, and we can brainstorm on that. Thank you.
problem.
I do want to go back to stormwater briefly, and actually it's tied right into what you were talking about. We're with this new non-residential structure, which is wonderful with me. I love it. The point is that we're charging everybody the same rate per ERU, but we're now charging people who have more ERUs more. Could we choose to not charge people the same per ERU? Could we create a progressive rate structure where if you have 100 ERUs, you're paying more per ERU than if you only have 5?
if you're a church, you can't help the land you own or the size of your parking lot right now. And so making a tier, like we have on the water side, well, you're punished because you have 30 ERUs. You're already going to see a really big change under this. And so you're going to be very interested in how can I get some stormwater treatment to bring that bill down. So in those cases, I'm not sure. It's not like I can really control that in terms of how much property I own. But for new development, but then the new development is in a different boat because you're already required.
Right, you're already.
Yeah, so that's not sounding like something we should do.
Okay. I think I get what you're saying. And maybe, and I'm seeing Ms. Roeder nod her head in the back. So maybe we put a pin in that. We do this. We see what impacts it has. If we still feel like there are a bunch of places that have tons of impervious acres and aren't mitigating
And
it.
they're not doing anything, then
Yeah.
then we look at that.
Yeah,
For sure.
so maybe I'll make a follow-up. Ms. Jackson, can we just ask the city attorney to make sure that's legal? There's not any reason why we wouldn't be legally allowed to do it. That's all I've got. Colleagues, anything else on the enterprise funds?
No, this has been great.
Yeah, I feel like
We're 5 minutes ahead, so let's take our 20-minute break and we'll resume it. Well, it's your thing, but I'm proposing that maybe we reconvene at 10:15 and you guys get out a little early.
that sounds great to me, yeah. All right, is there a motion to recess for 20 minutes and return at 11:50? 11
moved.
Sorry,
As per the naval officer's recommendation.
10:15 is the motion. Second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Motion carries, we're in recess. you good to stick with the 15 minutes for this?
Absolutely, like
Okay.
done in 15 minutes, or me done getting through the slides in 15
For
minutes?
the slides?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
5 probably.
Okay, I just figured we might have a bunch of questions. All right, we are back. It is 10:16 a.m. on April 28th. And Director Vogel, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Vogel, Director of Public Works. I'll let the folks who are with me introduce themselves. Tracy?
Tracy Brown, Public Works Analyst.
Betsy McKeown, Bureau Chief of Engineering and Construction.
All right, accomplishments. First one, you're already well aware of, City Docks, progressing very well. And then getting through that grant was a significant challenge. A lot of environmental and historic preservation hoops to jump through there. We've talked at length in the previous presentation about the stormwater fee adjustment. Great job there by the stormwater team to get that ready to go. And then lastly, a lot of other things I could have chosen as the third bullet, but traffic safety studies for some of our major corridors has been something we've been trying to get after for 2 or 3 years. I think that capital project went into the budget at least 2, if not 3 budget cycles ago, and it's finally underway. So I'm very excited about that. Moving on to performance measures, I'll just hit a couple of highlights or just things to point out here for the most part. Not a lot to see here, but the number of potholes repaired, that has been changed in the performance measures that the council passed a couple of months ago to something that we think will be a little bit more meaningful, because to me, is high good, is high bad, I don't know. And so now we're going to go to sort of a response time, which we know we'll be able to we would not be able to achieve a very quick response time to a pothole report as soon as the winter ends, right? So if you have a long freeze, a lot of snow, then you're going to have a lot of potholes, and it would take the crews some time to catch up. And so we wouldn't be able to respond quickly to all the pothole requests that come in immediately. But over, after that, things settle down, hit steady state. So we have a proposal or an objective for potholes of about 80% of the pothole requests that come in get responded to, I think, within a week is what I proposed there. Skipping down to the bottom of this page, something we're not still hitting, which is our hydrant testing. We really want to touch every hydrant every year, and we're still kind of on a 2-year cycle, and that's really just a matter of making sure that the people don't get reallocated to some other task who are responsible for this, and that they are doing the work quickly and efficiently. So there's just some supervision there. I see no resourcing challenges, nothing for the city council to help with to get us up to that 1,200 number. Next slide. Okay, another one here. Linear feet of storm drains maintained as a percentage of sewer mains under asset management. The reason I've got proposed up there as NA is this is just another one that doesn't make sense. I think I looked through these. I try to find 1 or 2 that I want to change every year. This one I probably should have changed last year, but I'm going to propose that we change it next year. It's just meaningless. Storm drains, our maintenance program involves cleaning out the inlets, not the actual pipes themselves. When it comes to being proactive on our storm drain system, it's really about inspections, which is a different metric. And then the last thing here is the third one down there, percent of CIP project milestones. This is the first year we've reported on this. It's a brand new performance measurement, and we kind of think we'll end up at 70%, not 80%, and I think next year we'll do significantly better as the staff is a little bit more used to the projection and what it is we're actually measuring. Next, please. No enhancements. No non-personnel enhancements. Trends here pretty much, because there are no enhancements and not much to see here. I think the only thing I would point out is that you see perhaps a big jump in salaries. That's not because we're adding positions. It's just mechanical thing, right? We propose the budget at all positions are filled. All positions are never filled, so that's why the past salaries are lower than you might expect. I'm sure that's the same with every department that comes here. Next slide. Revenue, our only revenue comes from our enterprise funds, and we've covered that already this morning. Next. And then here's a number that gets a little bit funny because we're commingling enterprise funds and general funds for our general fund expenses. And so, but just as I guess what percentage it would be enterprise versus what percentage is general fund, there we go, 73%. So the only really from a change standpoint with respect to the budget is that engineering construction contract services is going down a little bit from where we've been historically. A caveat that I'll point out here is that oftentimes what's in contract services is a budget amendment that a particular council member may propose to have a study performed, be that the Main Street reversal study, traffic circles, a road diet on Bay Ridge, so just to name a few. So sometimes these things are places where council members say, hey, I've got something I really want the engineering department to do, I'll add $50,000 into the budget. So that's, it's kind of where we sit right now, is a reduction there. And at that 135, we would not necessarily, if that were to stay the number, we would not necessarily have a lot of agility in terms of something comes across my desk that has an emergent requirement, we would end up having to do a funds transfer most likely. And so that's just an extra step. It means, rather than it being something that I entirely control, I'm working with finance and the city manager to do things that might come up during the year. And then the last little bullet there is not large numbers, but phones and software budget has been moved out of our budget, moved to ITS. Again, you've probably seen that from other departments. And I'm pretty sure I made the 15 minutes.
That's some. For one of the most complex departments, you managed to really boil that
We
down.
were already here for an hour for the...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're going to make me even be short on questions. But I'll let Alderwoman O'Neill start with questions.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of questions, and they're less, I guess, budget and more just operations. Street sweeper, I know that's one of your performance measures, and we've talked in the past. Is there any possibility of some type of schedule to the residents? And I don't mean to say like every Tuesday it's going to be this, but it would be helpful. The thing that I hear over and over again is, oh, I wish they knew I would have made sure my cars were off the street. Is there an opportunity for us to say, this ward is the first week of the quarter or whatever? Is there any chance of having some type of schedule?
There's a chance. Right now, we are fairly rudimentary in terms of how we manage this, and so it's very difficult to predict how much we're going to get done in any given time. We are, in conjunction with exploring ways to be more efficient and effective in snow removal, very close to entering into an agreement with a software company that can have routes, planned routes, and once we get that visibility and better control on what we're doing, I think there will be an opportunity to forecast better. Just because we are small, we have only a couple of pieces of equipment, we have 2 operators. Then you throw weather into the mix, that it's just very difficult to know exactly. Yeah, we can hit every 8 weeks on this particular schedule. You could expect the first week of every other, let's say for instance, the first week of an even numbered month, your neighborhood's going to get swept. We're not there. But it's possible that we could get a little bit more next week. You know, a Lamort could go out or the possibilities are there. It's just nothing I can promise in the very near future.
I would just also like to add that the major caveat with anything like that is parking restrictions and the appetite for that. I've looked into it as part of the stormwater program because you can get credit through the MS4 permit for street sweeping, and it's just difficult with trying to present parking restrictions associated with street
If people
sweeping.
knew, right? I think the Alderwoman's question is if folks knew that their street was going to be swept, they would voluntarily park elsewhere or in their driveways or something.
Right, exactly. Is,
Where are you going with that, though, Betsy? I feel like even if they knew, there are some folks in my ward who would not be very happy about it, but it's worth considering.
I mean, right now, your street, they go around your car.
They go around your car,
Because
right.
you don't know, you have no idea when they're coming. If I knew that the first week of the, even numbered months, there was a possibility of that, I would make sure that the midshipmen who park in my street, that we moved their cars, that we, because they're sitting there longer. There's some opportunities for people to have the ability to actually have their areas swept.
So let's say in a hypothetical future world, and I don't want to spend a ton of time because we probably have other forums where we could address this in depth. But in a hypothetical future world where there's an exact route that the sweepers take, you would be then, if we could share that information, and they would say, oh, I always know that when they go to this street, I'm the next day.
Yeah.
Then the residents could kind of keep an eye on our website, and they would see the maps, and they would see the routes, and they could kind of self do what you're saying because they would know.
Right. I would like to see it as a goal eventually, and it sounds like perhaps the snow removal app or software, I guess, could also benefit street sweeping in some.
Exactly, and that was something that Tracy said. Hey, this would be not only is this going to help us with snow, but maybe it can help us with this street sweeper.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would help a lot of people that have that question.
Right.
My second question is, we talked briefly about places like Clay Street, West Washington, which are city streets that could use maintenance, weeds from sidewalks, things like that, more so than other areas that maybe don't have as many renters on them. We talked a little bit about it, and can we make a plan so that at least at the beginning of the season, those areas are looked at by street maintenance staff?
The answer is yes, we could. I think it's a matter of policy whether we should. So I think that is something maybe another committee or the council in a working session, maybe it's a working session topic, is what is the appetite of city leadership to say, this neighborhood will do what is your responsibility as residents is to make your neighborhood look pretty. Or if you want to, you don't have to. But if you want your neighborhood to look pretty, you've got to do it. But other neighborhoods, we're going to go ahead and take care of that for you. That feels to me like a policy decision. And I'm not opposed to it because we've already done it downtown. We already gave up on Fleet, Cornhill, Maryland, East, and we just said that there's just because of the Airbnbs or whatever it is, people don't take care of their neighborhoods, or the shops don't have weed eaters. They don't take care of their neighborhoods the way we do in the more residential owner-occupied homes. So I just gave up on that one. I got tired of looking at weeds downtown, and we're spending like $10,000 a year to make downtown look nicer. It's been very well received. But I had a lot of heartburn. I wrestled with that $10,000 for a while before I just said we're going to do it. So there's an opportunity to do it. It's just a matter of I would like some direction from either mayor, council, whatever, on where you stop. That's my problem is you say this street and this street, but what about this other street? I don't know.
If I asked for specific streets and was able to find $10,000, that could happen? on those streets?
Yes. Yes. Again, just try to keep in mind, how do you limit something like this, and how do you take a fairness sort of approach to it? And if you're comfortable with it, you'll hear no objections from me. I'm just pointing out that as decision makers, as policymakers, that's a little where these things get tricky.
We used to have a crew that did it about 10, 12 years ago, I'm told. And once every other week, they were there cleaning up, making sure that the sidewalks were free of weeds. And it came out of a budget at some point in time, so it stopped. So
Probably around the same time we got rid of the trash. Public Works Services used to have a lot more people than we do now. I think, services was 60 at one point in time, and now they're 25.
okay, thank you. Those were my 2 questions for now.
Alderman Thorpe, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Vogel, I have to start by saying thank you. The amount of work that Public Works does that people don't see is amazing. And across the board, the amount of effort that's going in is great. So thank you. Let me first talk about snow. And I think it just might be a yes/no question, but you talked after an extensive after-action effort about technology and other equipment. We talked about authorities, but from a budget perspective, does this budget include everything that you think it should include in order to prepare us for snow removal next winter?
It does not. It does not. The one piece we just have to kind of tackle this one piece at a time. The one piece that we went after first was the software. That we want to be able to give turn-by-turn directions. We want to be able to know in real time where our drivers are. And the SnowPass system that we have now, while helpful in terms of communicating to the public, maybe where a plow has been, is not really an effective operational tool. So we've done our market research, we've interviewed with various firms or companies, and found the product we want. And we know that we can afford that out of our budget. We'll have to do a funds transfer to be able to pay for that using FY26 funds. How we pay for that next year is still an open question. It would seem to be under the approach that is being taken in this budget by the administration, is that would be an ITS cost. But again, there's always a place, if you're looking to come up with $20,000 or so, or $25,000, that should be something we should be able to manage. You keep in mind, right? We built the budget in December and January, and so things just sort of lag like this. But we always have these ways of being flexible in the year of execution. So while the budget doesn't have that $20,000 in it, we're going to find the money. There's some setup costs, so the upfront cost might be $40,000 or $50,000. The recurring tail to that is less. And then, equipment side, that's just tough to do without a fleet manager. And so we're kind of used to having a fleet manager, Danny Horwath, so where he would walk us through, okay, what are your needs for fleet and what's affordable, and he would present that. We're just kind of in a little bit of a transition period right now. So fleet management will be something that will be a big focus effort, I think, in the next budget, in the 28 budget.
The reason you don't have a fleet manager right now is because it went to central services, or it's just because
Somebody retired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pip Moyer was quoted I heard him say, we have 2 jobs on the city council: remove the snow and pick up the trash. Sounds like you're working the trash. So it sounds to me like this city council should put an amendment in the budget and lock in $25,000 for that software.
Fair.
Thank you. The next question is, I'd like to pile on to the street sweeper conversation, but maybe rather than go to a solution, to take some advice I've received and focus on the problem. I believe we should make a transition in Annapolis, and I represent Eastport, so I'll specifically talk about Eastport, and clean our streets better, and our sidewalks. But let me talk specifically about streets. I would like to work with you and Alderwoman O'Neill to explore what the what the best way is to clean our streets. In Eastport, our problem is cars, because the street sweeper, it's an obstacle course, and so it's exceptionally inefficient for the street sweeper to operate, and arguably, the street doesn't look a whole lot better as they weave in and out. And so I would like to put some priority, and if I would ask for your advice after this meeting, if we need to put resources into it, but to clean our streets, because what happens in Eastport is the leaves, the junk, the cars, they never move. Well, first of all, the normal stormwater washing doesn't clean it as much as effectively, and when it does, all that stuff goes right into the creek. So I'd rather pick it up in a street sweeper or something. So is that the best way forward, is to sit down with you and Alderwoman O'Neill and whoever the right people are and look at the plan? Or to turn it over to you and ask for a plan?
Turn it over to me. I think that's something we could target. We're in 2026 now. For some time, like sometime in 2027, we pilot maybe not all of Ward 8, but a subset of Ward 8 where we go to. I was just in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and there's a sign that's, it tells you on this day of this week, or maybe it's this day every week, do not park here. You will be towed. And that's, I think, the only answer. That it's got to be signed right there on the street. So we have to have a plan. We have to be able to communicate that plan and then execute on it. It's doable.
I would very much like to explore that. I am willing to take the hit on loss of parking for a period of time. To do that, again, I think it's communication. So I look forward to that. Thank you. And by the way, also, I think if we need to capital investment or leases or whatever for additional machinery, I think we're very open to that discussion.
Can I jump in with one little question on that? Is the limiting factor right now the machinery or the people for the street sweeping?
More people is my observation. We've got a few pieces, and I think some work better than others, but people, certainly in the wintertime, it's a different story, right? Because the sweep sweeper doesn't just sweep, it also cleans with water. If the ground is cold, we don't really want to do that for the fear of icing and things like that.
Thank you. Next subject, sidewalks. I feel like I'm partnering with one of my colleagues on each one of these topics, but thank you for the level of effort that you're going to in sidewalks. And quite frankly, Alderman Huntley's question about street sweepers is where I am on sidewalks. What is your limiting factor on doing more sidewalk work? Is it
by sidewalk work, you mean large-scale repairs, not responding to a resident complaint?
correct?
Limiting factor, yeah, both budget in the capital and then the people to manage that budget. Betsy's just completed interviews for another engineering position. If we were to be fully staffed in the engineering department, that would not be as much of a limiting factor. It would just simply be the budget. But I think we're spending all of the sidewalk repair capital budget as it is.
Okay. So what I hear is you've got a people challenge now, but you've already got the slot, you're filling it. Work that, see how that goes. And no?
What I heard
I think
is
the
he needs
thing
more money.
is right now, the staffing and the budget are in sync.
Yeah.
If you were to raise the budget and when I weren't fully staffed, we wouldn't be able to spend the money you added in the budget.
Right. So that's exactly where I was
They
going.
both have to go up together. We're funded on the people side. We're good there. Additional money in the capital project we'd be able to use. So our constraint today is both because we're short people, not a lot of money in the sidewalk budget. People's thing was solved in last year's budget. Now we're hiring the position.
Right.
And the budget would need to increase to do more sidewalk repairs.
So to put a finer point on it, when you you have a double problem in people. You've got an empty billet, and then you got a cap on, or not a cap, but you only have two people to do that. So my point is if we were, and to confirm what you said, if we were to raise the capital money for sidewalks, your 2 people that are working it would need to be beefed up.
No, as long as we're fully staffed, right, and people leave, as long as we're fully staffed, we could spend more money.
Okay, perfect.
We're in the budget, we have enough, but we have a vacant position right now.
Gotcha. A general question that sounds easy, but I'd like you to make it as hard as you can. If we were to give you another 5%, how would you spend it? In other words, not in this budget that you wanted when you cut 5%.
We didn't really cut. The only thing we did go down on was the engineering, construction, contractual services. That was, I don't think we took a full 5%. That was a fairly small amount. So kind of as I said, as I went through the slides, it's not that we wouldn't be able to do everything we needed to do. It would just be, there's some extra administrative steps involved from, if you have an engineering, construction, contractual services budget that's got plenty of money in it, a new requirement comes along, you just take care of it. In the future, we'll have to move money probably out of salaries into that budget and then spend it. I don't see that as being a big concern. In the larger, the bigger question of what would you do with an extra, let's say $1 million a year, I'd have to actually specifically think about that.
Okay, thank you. And thanks again for what you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to also ask about sidewalks. I don't want to shock you. But actually, I'm going to start with roads, which is to say, I think the question that the city manager has proffered before about roads and sewers and a lot of different things Public Works does is, are we keeping up? And looking at your performance benchmarks, which, by the way, what you did with getting rid of that number of potholes performance benchmark, like take that, bottle it, and give it to all the other department directors, because that is the mindset that we need on these performance metrics. The number of potholes repaired is not a good performance metric. And so huge kudos on that. What I'm trying to get at, though, is I think we are keeping up, but I think we also have a big backlog. And tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we do have a backlog on some of these, where now we're completing repairs for things like streets and sewers at the rate that they degrade. But given that past administrations didn't do that, it seems like we're not necessarily going to catch up. We're keeping up, but we're not catching up, is my sense. Does that feel accurate to you all?
I'll give you first crack at that. I have my opinions. I'll let Betsy go first.
And if we're not keeping up or we are catching up, let me know.
I don't think we're keeping up. I think our infrastructure is aging and we haven't been able to keep up for many years. I think we do what we can with the staff and the resources that we have, and we ensure safety and mitigate as much risk as we possibly can. But I think we're getting better in terms of our asset management program and really keeping an eye towards, the type of work, when we do it and how we do it. And as we are getting more improvement in that area to help advise the work that we do. But I think we could use more resources, absolutely, to really fully catch up.
Well, that's right. Are things getting objectively, demonstrably worse in, let's take infrastructure, right? Roads, road condition, sewer condition, water main condition. I can't say that they are. I really feel like we're keeping up or very close to just sort of treading water. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate
and it's a
you
little
both
bit
being
hard.
candid.
It's kind of like, hey, we had a cold winter or a hot summer. The climate is changing. I don't know. There's noise. right? Some years you have a lot of water main breaks, other years you have less. You have to evaluate those trends over a long period of time to really see an underlying signal. So it's a little bit of a subjective opinion, but I think we're keeping up. What would it take to catch up if we wanted an improved level of service? Yeah, it's going to take more people, more money in each of these areas.
Ms. Buckland?
So sorry, Vicki Buckland, Acting City Manager. I'll jump in about a couple of things, which these guys might cringe at, but I'll watch their faces to see. I think there are a couple of things that for me stand out when we're talking about this particular space. One is that in a perfect world, we would have very regular condition assessments that we could keep an eye on as far as are we keeping up, right? Because as indicated, depending upon the weather in any given year, and other factors, one year may be harder on our infrastructure than another. And a regular set of condition assessments would help us keep track of that and both prioritize and then give us that sense of, you know, how are we doing on here's what we expect for a normal distribution of condition assessments if we were keeping up. I think that that's not reasonable for us to assume that we're going to have anything approaching real-time condition assessments all the time, right? Those are going to be snapshots in time. But I think that those, and Public Works does do them, and I think helps set the agenda for what the priorities are and acts as a little bit of a reality check once those come in terms of how are we doing. So I think having, from a performance perspective, having those conversations a little bit in tandem might help for you guys to kind of have a better sense of what they know more intrinsically because they're used to seeing that stuff. And the other thing is that, you know, the city's been around a while. We have not, as we've grown over time, the build out of infrastructure has not been linear, right? We've had periods where there's been stronger growth and all of that. And so we budget as though this was essentially an even number year after year, but it's not really, right? It's clumpy. The growth of the city was clumpy, and therefore the refresh of the infrastructure ends up being a little bit clumpy.
And to make things even more fun, water's a great example. We have plenty of water pipes that were built in 1870, 1880, 1900, 1910, in fantastic condition. They're going to probably give us another 20 or 50 years. We have a lot of water pipes that were built between 1920 and 1950. The quality of materials that were used during that period were not as good. Those are the ones that are failing.
Oh, that is
So it's not just the linear growth of the city, it's the construction means and methods of a particular period or an era, and those are places where we have problems. So it's a complicated system, how you assess condition. Roads is one where we can assess condition pretty well. We have a periodic 4-year assessment, and I can look at that. It's hard to aggregate that data, but the way I analyze it is how many zeros and twos are out there. And are those zeros and twos on, kind of a road that's got 10 houses on it and low traffic? Okay, we can live with that. But if it's kind of a main sort of connector road and we got lots of zeros and twos on connector roads, that's a problem. So that is a little bit more where you can objectively assess, and we have those records over enough period of time that you can kind of see whether we're getting better or worse.
And DPW has invested in some other technologies with the cameras and things like that to see better into some of not the surface level infrastructure, but the buried infrastructure as well.
Which is why these metrics here that are inspected are really, really important. Linear feet of sewer mains inspected. We got to keep up on that because that's running a camera. And then we get to see what the condition of that sewer line is, and if it's in bad shape, we line it, which is much quicker and less disruptive than having to dig a giant trench and replace that.
Yeah, so as far as, I still think the underlying question is the right question. Are we keeping up? It's just that getting at that answer is, in a perfect world, we'd have all of this information at our fingertips, but that's not the world we live in. And so we use these proxies to try to get a better feel. I didn't see you guys cringe through any of that, so I'm super happy.
So then the proxies are, water main breaks is something, but those are highly variable. Sewer problems are a little bit more consistent. And of course, they depend on resident behavior a little bit, but the condition of our pipes is important there too. So when we have sewer overflows, sewage coming out of a manhole, that is something, a trend we can readily see. And the sewer backups into people's basements and things like that, which are a little bit less visible to the public, but that's another indicator of how we're doing on our overall kind of long-term capital maintenance, but also how we're doing on the operating side of maintaining those lines on a day-to-day basis.
Now, what I think from all of this is that you guys have put a lot of thought into it, and you have something of a plan. You have the ability to let us know whether we are just keeping up, we're not keeping up, or we're keeping up and catching up. At some point, I would love to have more visibility on that, but from what we're hearing today, I can trust that, you guys are working on that. And the last thing I'll say on that topic is just, you said real time, we're not going to get real time. I actually was just reading the other day about how Waymos are giving cities real-time road condition data, which is really cool to think about, that every time they hit a pothole, they're letting that San Francisco Department of Public Works know, which is fascinating.
There's some really interesting technology coming out.
Yeah, there's some AI stuff coming out. I'm sure you get a bunch of solicitations. I occasionally get cold calls as well of new stuff that's out there. So yeah, there is interesting stuff coming down the pike.
Yeah, and you can imagine just even aerial photography of it. Okay, to transition, I want to talk a bit about salaries and benefits. My big top line concern here is that, as you were talking about earlier, there's almost always you underspend in salaries and benefits. Everybody kind of does. But engineering construction budget, salaries and benefits is a good 20-ish% above what was budgeted from what I'm looking at. What caused that this year?
Mapping of salaries was inaccurate.
Mapping? How do you mean?
That's maybe not the word that these folks use, but a given position maybe is supposed to be charged to water and sewer, but got charged against general. So you would have been looking probably at the general fund. And so
Yes, I'm looking at
inappropriate
general.
charges from a position that was budgeted one way, but charged a different way. Not something we control in the department.
Got it. So it should, if everything were reflected accurately, you would be within your.
But well under. When you see the final numbers, it'll be well under.
Gotcha.
Finance is correcting that.
Mr. Palakal or Mr. Johnson, you guys want to weigh in on this?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
I heard you say ENC stuff.
Yeah. So the ENC budget summary, the FY26 projected number is significantly higher than the FY26 budget. And I'm just trying to understand why that is.
Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. So yes, what Director Burr was stating in regards to the mapping. So when new positions are created in the system, they're added as just ENC or DPW, and it automatically gets routed to ENC. So what happens is some of the positions need to be split, let's say ENC, or they need to be 50-50 water sewer. So that's what we're doing as far as the workforce plan now. So what you see in proposed for 27, that should be reflective of the adjustments that were made.
Got it.
So we should be good to not go over the budget based upon what the mapping is happening. So when we submit these new mappings, it should balance out. And if we need to, move the charges to the correct division, we can do that as well.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
This is just a note, not a question, but to Mr. Palakal, I think DPW is one of the areas where we should look at what their regular vacancy savings are and have a line item for that. I mean, we were talking yesterday on the phone that you can't necessarily know in HR where they have 8 people, but DPW with 630 in the general fund, 660 in the general fund, there should be a clear enough trend that we could put that in. And so I'm thinking for DPW, for maybe planning and zoning, maybe ADOT, but certainly police and fire, that's something that we should have reflected in the budget. So,
Noted.
yeah, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about snow also, and apologies if it makes you twitch, but I'm not here to
You're
complain.
re-traumatizing me, by the way, just to be clear.
I'm not here to complain about the results, but I do want to look at the money. Our snow budget we're way over budget, which makes sense because we had way more of a snowstorm than we would expect. But what I don't understand is why did nobody ever come to us about that? Why, how can we be $600,000 over budget on a $170,000 budget and it doesn't require any kind of fund transfer, supplemental appropriation, or anything like that? And that's probably less to you three at the
Not
table.
me, yeah.
Yeah.
Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. So we will be coming to you. It happens, we do it fourth quarter transfer. The reason we're doing it as a fourth quarter transfer because invoices were still coming in. We still have processed invoices within like the last month or so. So we wanted to make sure we had everything finalized before we came to you guys to make the transfer. So we will be coming to the committee with a transfer. It's just we wanted to wait until everything's settled.
Got it.
Yeah.
And is there some kind of requirement in code about essentially like how far outside of the budget the mayor can go on something, the city manager can go on something before needing council approval? Yeah.
Yeah, the limit is $25,000 and can't move between funds. So anything that's a movement between funds outright has to come to council. And I can't do supplementals. So if it hasn't initially been appropriated, I can't do that on my own. So you guys see anything that's new money or money that's moving between funds, but inside a fund, up to $25,000, city manager can approve.
And is there a timeline by which something that's above that $25,000 threshold has to come to us?
No, there's not a timeline in code. The timeline ends up being more driven by practicality, in my experience, and you guys may have a different perspective, but the city keeps Munis fairly locked down in terms of how your ability to overspend individual lines. So the city has a pretty high incentive to bring things in a reasonably timely manner for some things, for most things, frankly. I don't know if Darren, if you've got a different answer.
Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. So the reason we like to wait is because we rather try to cover it in-house. So we try to wait till we get closer to the fourth quarter so we could take a look at salary savings, or we could take a look at areas who haven't spent funding that was allocated for certain things, and we pull from those pots versus coming to you guys and say, hey, we want to use contingency. So if we don't need to use contingency, we rather pull the funding that we have that was allocated. If we have vacant positions, we know we're going to have some salary savings. So we rather pull from the funding internally versus coming to you guys and moving funding from different pots. So that's why we wait till fourth quarter.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. I just, I have a little bit of a concern that we could have a situation where, we're going to find some way to pay for snow removal. We all agree snow removal is a great thing, like we needed it. But in a different circumstance, having $170,000 budgeted and the administration spending $800,000 could be a real problem for something else that we wouldn't necessarily want to wait 3-4 months to have the council say, no, you can't do that. So I don't know, that's not a question, just a complaint.
There is a disaster fund or kind of a rainy day fund set up almost for this reason.
That's contingency.
Contingencies
Yeah,
there for
that's
that.
contingency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like you have something to say on this. Do you want to jump
Wait till I talk, or do you want to stay on the same subject?
in? This is same subject on snow. Yeah. So are you talking about snow?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
So I think it's really important that the Director of Public Works in the city had the authorities to spend the money in whatever state of emergency or whatever it was. We wouldn't want to cause a delay. But I do share, I think, the sentiment here that we should have a process that makes that automatic, that's different than the Director of Public Works deciding he wants to spend $500,000 on something different that is not an emergency. So this is what we talked about in the after action is does the Director of Public Works have and the mayor and the city manager have the authorities to commit resources in times of crisis? And it seems to me that there should be a difference between times of crisis when money has to be spent without coming to the city council and normal times when the Director of Public Works halfway through the year says, we didn't budget for this, but we need to do this. It's not an emergency. I want to come to the Finance Committee and the City Council to move money. And so I don't know if that's a problem that gets solved today, but it seems to me like we should look at legislation that doesn't question, that literally gives the Director of Public Works, the city manager, and the mayor the authorities in times of crisis to spend money that's different than in routine times.
But speaking of the routine times, and just from my perspective, I can't do that. I have no mechanism to overspend any account. I think up to $25,000, city manager can approve that, but that's your control. That's the authority you've given the city manager is he or she can approve up to $25,000 via funds transfer and inform council afterwards or whatever. So I'm already pretty constrained. I can't do it, right? I have what's in my budget, and to spend a penny over, I don't have the ability to do that.
But you did it during the snowstorm, I hope.
Different, right?
But that's my
But I
question.
did because, for instance, in snow, we just told contractors, go out and do stuff and send us a bill. We didn't actually have to follow the normal process of, I'm going to write you a purchase order for $50,000. As soon as that purchase order hits the system, that money is gone. And if I don't have $50,000 in that account, I can't write that purchase order. The system won't let me. So unless we're using these emergency authorities to authorize work that we haven't even written a purchase order for, I don't have that ability.
And that's my question is, has the city council given you the financial tools in order that nobody second guesses you up to a threshold that you called the contractors and said, go to work, you called a couple dump trucks, you did
Right,
this?
we order salt, it's fine,
Right.
and then we reconcile the accounting later.
Right. So
That's the only example that I can think of where that is allowed.
hurricanes,
Sure.
tornadoes, natural
But
disasters.
I don't know what the policy is that allowed me to do that. We just did it because it's what we always
We
do.
need to look into that.
Yeah, I actually just made a note. I've got a running list of things to have hearings on when we have a new finance director and we're done with the budget. But what I think I'm hearing from you is if you have emergency procurement authorities, you essentially have emergency spending authorities.
Correct.
And that explains it to me. But yeah, we do need a bigger discussion on that. But thank you for indulging me in this far. Still on snow, I totally understand, again, we should not be budgeting as much for FY27 as we spent in FY26. But why are we budgeting less in FY27 than we budgeted for in FY26? Across contractual services and supplies for snow. Or as always, feel free to tell me if I'm wrong and I'm looking at the wrong numbers.
Right, I'm going to ask Darren for help on this one.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure.
I'll try to repeat it. year-over-year budget 2026 to 2027, contractual services and supplies, is there a decrease? One reason could be, and I know this to be true, some brine equipment, right?
That was capital outlay.
Capital outlay.
Yeah. So we bought brine tanks, brine trucks, that kind of thing.
So, okay, on the supplies and other, I just dug into a little bit, and it actually looks like it's because we are not, you're not getting allocated for fuel oil anymore. So I guess that's going through central services now. Yeah, Vicky's nodding her head. And then, yeah, it looks like we're decreasing contract services. So any explanation, Mr. Johnson?
Darren Johnson, as Burr stated, there was 46,000, that was capital outlay. That was for the large brine tanks. It was for something else that had to do with brine, but that was 46,000. 10,000 that was moved to ITS. So that's like 56,000 right there.
Got it. So that the 10,000 going to ITS, that's what I was trying to search down. Okay, that answers my question, I think. Yeah, cool. Makes perfect sense. Can you tell me any more about this $125,000 we have going for traffic engineering, traffic studies? Do we already know where that's going to? This is under engineering constructions, contract services. It's listed for us as traffic engineering support studies and improvements. I mean, I guess that's Jeff's authority.
That may be just a note that's in the budget documents that's not quite accurate. That's all contractual services for the engineering department. Any consultants we need to use that isn't associated with a capital project falls under that. So yes, it tends to be what we typically are more interested in is traffic safety. That's what it would tend to use that money for.
I'm thinking like that stop sign we were dealing with on College Ave in St. John's, and we had to pay somebody to do a traffic study. Like, that's the kind of thing that it popped up and you'd have.
If we were going to pay somebody to do the engineering work for that, which we didn't, we did that in-house, we could use that money. But the way we actually installed that work was we used the traffic safety improvements capital project. Our other choice there is the service, like the streets operating budget, which we would have been another choice, but that's a very limited budget and is always spent.
Yes. I'll save a conversation for that for Thursday. The streets, the general streets, or no, you're saying operating, not capital.
Correct.
Wait,
So
can you tell me
streets,
more
right,
about
we have
this?
people
Yeah.
that are out, we repair streets using our operating budget, using our crews, and they can repair streets, or maybe even, they might have a very small contractual services amount in streets. We usually go through that. So when it comes to traffic safety things, I typically go and use the traffic safety capital project.
So you were just saying streets budget is very small. When I look at this, I see $4.3 million of streets operating budget. That doesn't seem right to me. Is what's going on there maybe that, what the heck could be going on there? Streets budget summary is listed for us at $4.3 million in operating budget. That
A
can't be right.
lot of salaries, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're not really spending $3 million a year on salaries for streets, are we? I mean, if we are, I'm kind of impressed, but yes?
Doesn't sound like a particularly strange number to me. I think of that group as being 25, 30 people, average salary 100,000. If you salaries and benefits, sure.
Yeah, if you
Back in the napkin, that sounds about right.
yeah, if you look up in the staffing summary, the streets team has about what Burr said in terms of there's 14 equipment operator ones, 3 equipment operator twos, 2 equipment operator threes, and then 6 public works maintenance worker ones, and then an assortment of other folks and some temporary laborers as well.
Got it. Okay, I don't mean to belabor this point. I think I just got thrown off when you said it was a small budget. And then
It's
I saw
like
that.
the things that are kind of not fixed costs, it's pretty
Yeah.
small.
Got it.
Relatively.
Mr. Johnson, you have something to add?
Darren Johnson, Senior Budget Analyst. No, I was just about to say projected for streets is like 2.9 million.
Yeah.
projected for 26. And if we look at actuals for 25, it's around 2.8 million. So we're on
Got
track.
it. Thank you. I have a couple questions about the water fund. You mind if I ask those now?
Water?
Water fund. Yeah.
Sure.
Any particular reason why we're switching some people from water supply and treatment facility over to water distribution? Looks like we're switching a public works maintenance worker into there and a utility mechanic into there.
Interesting. I'll defer to finance. Maybe Tracy seems like she knows. We're not decreasing the staff at the plant. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm just curious why we're moving. On our spreadsheet, it looks like we're moving from one part of it to another part.
Tracy Brown, Public Works Analyst. They were actually put into the wrong, last budget, they were placed into the wrong budget. They were placed in water plant, they should have been placed in water distribution. So we are correcting it, part of the correction we did with the,
One of last year's enhancements was
Correct.
a couple of folks to work in water distribution. But I guess when the budget actually got finalized, they went to the wrong place.
correct.
Thank you very much. A couple other just little ones. The water plant operation system update, what is that? Seems like a good thing, but what is it?
It's software. It's the software that runs our industrial controls.
And so we're getting a whole new software for that?
It's at the end of its life, like kind of some 20-year-old program that's no longer supported by anyone. It doesn't run on, Windows 10, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not looking for things to get rid of. I will actually disagree with Pip Moyer over here and quote the former alderman from Ward 8 who would tell me that the two most important things we do are clean water in and dirty water out. So that's, trash and, what'd you say, trash and snow? Pretty important also. Last thing, just going to ask you about is the vertical assessment management project for our sewage pump stations. What is, am I sorry? I was just curious what that is, but if you don't know off the top of your head, you could definitely get back to me. Oh.
Your department.
I don't even know, to be honest.
If you want details, I'll probably have to get back to you, but it's an assessment of our pump stations to figure out what needs to be fixed, replaced, and inventoried to address those things.
Oh, just, are they working, the same kind of thing we were talking about
I
earlier?
think it must be just another little piece of the asset management program. So a pump station is a tank. It kind of stores, our wastewater, and then the pumps pump it to the next place on its way to the treatment plant.
It's kind of what Vicki stated as the condition assessment. It's assessing the conditions of each pumping station.
Right. The last thing I have for you is just a congratulations. One of the things that stood out to me in your accomplishments was consolidating fire hydrant data sets. And that's like super not sexy, and I'm sure nobody in the public is even going to be listening to me talk about this, much less know that it happened. But that is the kind of thing that I'm sure makes us all more efficient. And I'm really happy when I see stuff like that where we're using technology to better manage our public infrastructure. So thank you. Any questions from either of my colleagues? We got a little more time. We're good? All right. Well, we could wrap up a little bit early. I thought we were going to spend a bunch of extra time on DPW, but no. We don't have anything. We can't do this fund transfer. Kaylin let me know she didn't put it on the agenda. So I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.